Okay, so I added $70,000 to the BitU swing trade I've been talking about recently on this channel. So I'm going to show you guys what that looks like in a moment. And on top of that, there's two topics kind of roaming around the internet, and I feel like they're getting a lot of attention. So I want to give my opinions on them, and it will make sense as I talk. When I start talking about them, you guys will know exactly what I'm talking about. But about that 70K position, here it is. That's the current value as of today's market close. I do plan on actually adding more. Fortunately, this time around, the dip was not short lived, unlike last time when we were over here. It actually was a pretty quick recovery. This time around, I feel like we can actually hold this area a bit longer, so I may want to add more and put more in there than just the 70K. But real quick, if you guys saw that jobs report, it was terrible, right? It was like so many people are jobless, and the market is still falling just because it was so aggressive. I'm gonna get into that in a moment as well. But the first thing I want to talk about, and as an introduction, real quick, um, if you are someone that has a job, you have your income. I hope you guys realize how fortunate you are, because it's obvious after today's report that there's a lot of people um, that are struggling or just starting to struggle due to jobless, and it could be due to tariffs. It could be due to a lot of things. But regardless, um, you got to realize how fortunate you are if you are not one of those people in those reports, right? So it's just something to think about, at least, right? A lot of people tend to forget and take advantage, or not, but just take a lot of this for granted, right? So it's very important. First thing, real quick, before we jump into Bitcoin and Mara stock, there's word of like there's actually the two parts are there's a mix of people not sure if the bull market is done or still alive, and then the second part is there is a lot of people that believe the bull market is done. So I'm gonna address both of these points in my own opinion. And if you guys have been watching, not here, but back when we were hitting that CME gap, I believe it was right here, right? So around um, early April, even late March. If you guys have been watching during that time before we bottomed, I kept saying that I still believe the bull market is alive. We saw an aggressive dip and it doesn't seem to recover. But then I kept saying that, at least in my own personal opinion, um, the characteristics right now are very, very similar to then. Everything's mostly the same, except this time around we're just at a higher price. But you know, we just entered the eighth month of this year, of the last year of this bull market cycle, at least traditionally speaking, and it's just too early, right? Usually we tend to see a lot of bearish potential momentum building up a lot later into the years, but besides the time factor, we're in this environment where there's a lot of pressure, right, on whether or not rates are going to get cut, and then well, after today's jobs report, it shows that the likelihood of, and you guys can look it up, but the likelihood of the Fed cutting rates in September is extremely higher. And I'm not saying I do believe they will cut, but it just shows that the one, but there's many things, but the primary thing the Fed looks at is jobs numbers, and to decide if they want to cut rates or not, to prevent potential, whatever it is, a recession or anything. Because a lot of people are accumulating debt. I'm sure. It's realistic to think so. And on top of that, it's like if you have so many people struggling, they're gonna basically be forced to cut rates. And on top of that, like as rates begin to get cut and tariffs become negotiations become a lot more optimistic because they're actually happening, and we start seeing tariffs starting to become more of a thing of the past instead of a thing of the present. And there's just gonna be so much, in my opinion, so much inflows into all kinds of growth assets. It's gonna be crazy. Um, so as we are waiting for that, it's the same thing. We're seeing dips happen, just like when I showed you guys back here. We're seeing these dips happen, aggressive dips, and a lot of people are getting feared out, and they're like, "Oh, is the bull market done? Maybe this is it." Well, just looking at those fundamental reasons, like we're seeing artificial discounted prices. The same thing I said earlier this year, artificial discounted prices. The prices are falling due to outside news factors, in my opinion, and none of this actually has to do with the underlying asset. It's all just macroeconomic emotions in the market, and that's allowing us to. It's filling in my target. I'm gonna go over this purple one down here in a moment. It's not super significant, but I'm gonna go over it. But regardless of this happening the way it is, it's still allowing the price to come down into the overall primary support area that I'm looking at, and it will allow the price to finally fill in these previous imbalance gaps, and create that value that we really want. Now, another thing too, it's like, you know, if let's just say the market, and this is just something to think about, but let's just say the bull market is done and we are in this the beginning of the bear market earlier than expected, right? And the price not as high as expected either. But if that were to be the case, could this be Bitcoin's first historic short bear market? Because let's just say the price keeps dropping, it keeps dropping, and it's creating crazy lows. But then a couple months later from now, like super short bear market, like rate cut happens, a ton of it, tariff start to not become a fear topic anymore, and it starts to become a lot more optimistic. uh, like that could just end the bear market super super easily, and early as well. But that's just something to think about. I want to jump into the charts now. But do you guys remember all of the optimism, all of the crazy optimism we had in this rally, and now it's like everyone just forgot about it, right? No one's paying attention to the bigger picture, but that's okay. That's why I want to cover it here. So again, everything in this video is my own personal opinion, guys, but we're gonna get started. So for a while now, I've been basically stressing these two overlap support areas, bearish extension and an overall retracement, right? The reason this is so significant isn't just because it's filling, and I said that it's very high probability that it will fill, but we're now in this moment where external artificial factors tied to Bitcoin are pushing it down and allowing us to come down into this area. Like, this is the moment where we can finally start seeing Bitcoin trade again around 110K, potentially all the way down to 107 and 108K. This is where the true like value buyers for Bitcoin will step in. Like, if you're truly a believer in Bitcoin, it doesn't have to be what Bitcoin is about, but the overall believer that, hey, a fixed supply assets that cuts its inflation rate in half every 4 years, and more is being bought up than is being created, then it's like, just that alone, like, does that not seem attractive to go higher? Like, you don't have to believe in Bitcoin, but just the underlining, supply and demand of it, it's like it's crazy. And during this time where there's fear, you still have a lot of institutional buying. So just like I said earlier this year too, like a lot of this discounted Bitcoin in the short term, I do not believe it's very like sustainable, and I believe it will quickly recover out of it soon enough. So I want to jump into Mara because pretty much if I say anything else, I'm just repeating everything I said in previous videos. But yeah, like, we're finally in this area, and I kept saying like it's super high probability. It's what I'm expecting. We're in it, so I'm very much excited because now with this terrible jobs report, it's like when a lot of this short term fear fades away and we go in, we're getting closer to the next FOMC. We can potentially, in my opinion, potentially see also an early rally into it due to aggressive anticipation that the Fed has to try to save a lot of these jobless individuals, right? To hopefully not create a bunch of debt that's not being paid, and the banks are having issues, and then a lot of other stuff unfolds. And on top of that, like, the U.S. has to print money. It's just, the way the U.S. debt is currently structured is like it's not sustainable. It's not super healthy. It's absolutely like crazy, and that's where Bitcoin comes in too. So I mean, at the end of the day, regardless, we still have a little bit more downside to go. I mean, at this point, we have a lot of momentum. There's also another way of looking at this, because I do have these two areas focused on the bigger picture, if you guys want to be more aggressive with it, like you can even factor in this move, right? The actual breakout move. Look at that. We're around 110. We're still overlapping. This is actually 3 layers of the same area. And then if there's another way of looking at it too. It's like the previous swing high before we had the little fake out that I've been talking about, and then the price dips. So same thing there. Like as you can see, like we came down into this area and it's not healthy. It just broke through. It consolidated within it, and then it just broke past it. That's why, especially in yesterday's video, I talked about why I focus on bigger picture trends so much, because usually it just gives you a lot much better idea of the overall momentum than it is to just look at it on the 5 and 15-minute chart. But yeah, guys, we're in this really nice accumulation area, 70k in. I want to add more. So actually, if it continues to hold, I mean, if it breaks the 0.5 and goes below 110k, like I may add like a decent amount more to that 70k trade. To be honest, it's just so good. Like when you have all of this fear causing these discounted prices, and like all this fear has a solution, which is cutting rates, and like what's gonna pressure the Fed to cut rates, like a lot of stuff I just talked about. So it is what it is, and it's amazing. And now Mara stock, right? I kept telling you guys also in previous videos, I'm like, there's no reason to be FOMO. There's no reason to be hyped up. The overall view is for this area to get filled. We finally broke, and I know a lot of you have been telling me too. You began, or you're about to open up some. I think you probably all have, the few of you that told me, but yeah, we're below the 0.5 retracement on an overall, big picture retracement. Like this is, a really really good value in my opinion, just as long as you're able to withstand the time frame before we go up to break out of the red once again, but not just that, to potentially come up around that like $21 price range I've been talking about recently, right? So again, it's the same thing here and here. The reason of creating this fib retracement, it's the same, right? It's to allow the price to come down into short-term very discounted buying opportunities where we can start to potentially see volume shift. But at this point, due to how aggressive that interest, the jobs report was, like I just wouldn't be surprised if it takes a minute for the market to sort of realize any short-term discount, and it could probably consolidate for a while. Again, we still have a bit more downside momentum. We can easily come down into the low 14s. We can even break this a little bit just to retest the swing low right here, but the price is trying to hold that ascending support line. Regardless, it just makes sense for us to come down a little bit more. The overall environment shows like there's enough fear to potentially cause this to come down lower. But like any further dip, and especially if it breaks below the 0.618, like I'm personally probably not sure yet, but I might just start buying some option calls that it would expire like later in the year, like sometime before the holidays or something like that, because that's more than enough time. I don't think the premiums will be that bad either on those calls. But yeah, like that's if it breaks below 1430. At that point, like I'm like ringing dinner bell for my buy button on my brokerage app, because that's crazy. But even right now, like the value is still really good in my opinion. Like we're in overall retracement, caused, same thing like Bitcoin, caused by external fears that really have that really shouldn't be affecting it, and it should honestly just, but the correlation between risk on assets and crypto, and I mean, I'm not saying Mara stock is like crypto. It has a lot of other factors I explained in different videos, that which is why it doesn't trade exactly like Bitcoin. But like we're below that 0.5 retracement, we're back in the 15s. We can easily enter the 14 dollar ranges, and there is a potential of getting like a wick or two below 14 into the 13s. But at that point, I already expressed how I feel about that. Right now, though, if any of you are deciding on your own risk management, your own terms, and how you handle your trades, if you decide this is something from your own due diligence that you want to partake in buying longs, um, just understand, like, yeah, this is a really, really good value in the short term, and we can easily be back above the 20s, easily. But again, the likelihood of us holding around this range is very, very possible. I don't remember. I know a lot of you have been watching since the channel started, basically, but I don't know if it was late 2024 or early 2025. No, no, yeah, yeah, yeah. It was like halfway through 2024, I believe, around like Q3 or something like that. We haven't seen Mara do this in a while, but the characteristics in the overall macro environment are very similar. During that time, I believe, and the structure is also very similar. Where we saw that like sideways channel, where the price created like super clear support and resistance lines within I don't remember if it was within a fib or not, but basically it created a really, really nice consistent channel that lasted like 2 months. And I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, because like a lot of people are gonna realize like short term, like Mara's pretty discounted. Like this is looking really, really good. And then there'll be a lot of like still waiting for confirmation on like the Fed and rates and tariffs and all that. And then eventually we'll see like this wide um, fluctuative sideways move that can allow us to potentially capture like really quick, um, like 1 to 2 day long swing trades that just move sideways for like over a month. If you guys remember that, let me know. But it happened like twice, um, and it was like a few months of just sideways movement. And because of the discounted nature of this overall move in the short term, and a mix of like optimism and fear, I wouldn't be surprised if we just consolidate within this area for a little bit. But the idea is that accumulating within this overall retracement, um, with I mean, you can even be safe about it too. Like what an SL below or an SL at the previous swing low, if you want to do that, that's absolutely fine, and probably a good thing that you do that, because it's a good risk management practice. But the idea is just like back here, just like here, just like here, this retracement allows a decent buying opportunity for when the price goes up. And even if you don't think it's going to go up here, like it still allows anyone that, in my opinion, that accumulates around that $15.50 range, it allows still for like a nice sell opportunity at like $18. And if your average, as we trade within this area and potentially come down and actually hit the 14s, hit that 14.30, and your average, you can still get like 20% return on like a short term trade, like just to capture the, if you believe it's a bullish fake out, and then you just sell at the retracement, like that's absolutely fine as well. But for those of you that like are willing to hold for like maybe a few months, this is the area that at least I'm looking at in my own personal opinion, because we can consolidate for a while, and then the way up can be like super fluctuative, and we have a nice deep test of this. But even though we hit the point 0.5, it doesn't mean that like any push out of this means we're not going to come back down. Like we can still have a second retest of this red area, but again, it's just um there's good value here. This is the moment, in my opinion, where like where buying is very important. And again, that's just me. But even if you buy now, again, there's still a little bit of more short term bearishness. We don't have bullish confirmation yet, but we can easily come down lower. But like this is the place. This is the place to be jumping in on Mara. And you can sell at a retracement around 18, or you can like structure your sells all the way up to like 21 to $22, or however you want to do it. It doesn't matter. But the idea is that we finally, and I kept stressing how important this area is, we finally came down into it. So yeah, that's my take on Mara. Really good value right now, in my opinion, just as long as um you can withstand the time horizon until we finally go into that take profit area. But the discounted nature of Mara to come down not just into like 1430, but like briefly below 14 and trade in the 13s for like a minute. Um, and by a minute, I mean like a couple days or something like that, before it recovers back up into the retracement. We can see amplified fear by Bitcoin still trying to hit this area. Like it can easily reverse from here. Um, but it's still very much possible we can hit the point 0.5 retracement. We can easily trade around 110, even come down into the discounted portion of this range, and that can amplify fear in Mara. So just keep in mind, like there's still some short-term weakness, um, but I believe the value's there, right? And I kind of already expressed myself. Now this purple area, this is in case, like, fear layers over more fear, and like having um new fear and like increasing current fear in the overall market, just causing like a panic. This area is an overall retracement from the CME gap we saw earlier this year around um like $74,500. This is the overall retracement for this area. Like if we come down into this area, this is like, in my opinion, a no-brainer buying opportunity. And the amount of value and like quick momentum that can come out of this, it's also a no-brainer for Mara if you just keep an eye on both, in my opinion. But like I don't really think this area will fill. I do believe we can come down to like 107, even 106k potentially. um this area isn't super likely, and if it even does come into this area, like it'll recover out of it, in my opinion. Just like I'm saying everything I said from earlier this year as well. It's all the same characteristics. But again, we're in a really nice accumulation area for Bitcoin. I believe there's a lot of value right here. If we hold within this area, I will accumulate more. But I'm gonna give it time to see if it wants to hold the area and break that 0.5 to down to 110k. Before I add more. Like another 10,000 at least, and then right, if it doesn't, it just decides to recover, then cool, we invested the original amount of 70k, right? But the idea is, again, there's a lot of value right here with Bitcoin. It can take a minute before we have an uptrend confirmation. We can trade within this area a little bit, but the idea is that the value is there, in my opinion. And then same thing with Mara. The value is there, but we still have a little bit of short-term weakness. We can maximize this area regardless. Once again, really good value. It just depends on your how your time management and risk management collide. It's really what it comes down to. Like this one recovered pretty quick. It still took a few weeks, but this one recovered nicely. This one came down. It recovered pretty quickly, a few weeks out of this area. This one's a lot wider, and there's a lot of value gaps within the candles on the hourly, and there's a lot of like mixed news. It wasn't very like one directional news like we had during this time. Right now it's super mixed, so consolidation in this area is very likely, in my opinion. But again, value, I'm just repeating myself at this point. We hit the area like I said we would. So now we're just positioning ourselves for the next pump higher. And hopefully earlier when I said that, why I believe the bear market has not started, and there's still a lot of reasons for it to go higher due to, again, there's a wave of fear going away, and then we just have like Fed printing cash and rate cuts and like tariffs become more of a past thing. It's like all that is like I believe we're getting near that, and that's going to influence a lot of buying in Bitcoin and a lot of growth assets. Yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.